Have you ever wished for something so badly that you'd do anything to make it come true? What if you had the power to change your fate with a simple wish? But what if that wish came at a terrible cost? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most chilling stories ever told, a tale of temptation, tragedy, and the dark consequences of meddling with forces far beyond our control. This is the story of the monkey's paw, a mysterious object with the power to grant 3 wishes. But be warned, those wishes twist your deepest desires into nightmares. What happens when one family dares to make a wish, only to discover that their greatest dreams could become their worst horrors? Stay with us as we unravel the eerie, unforgettable events of this cursed tale. You won't believe the terrifying price they paid. And by the end, you might find yourself asking, would you still make that wish? It was a dark and stormy night in the remote English countryside. The wind howled and rain drummed relentlessly against the windows of the White family's modest cottage. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the crackling sound of a fire. The cozy room seemed a world away from the cold, damp wilderness outside. Mr. White, an older man with rough hands from a life of hard work, sat pondering a chess move. His wife, gentle and kind, rocked back and forth in her chair, watching with an amused smile as their son, Herbert, playfully taunted his father's lack of strategy. It was an ordinary evening, filled with the kind of simple joys that come from family life. But little did they know, this moment of peace was the last they would have. Soon a visitor would arrive, bringing with him a tale of mystery and a relic so dangerous it would change their lives forever. This opening scene serves to introduce the White family and their quiet, happy life. The warmth of their home and the simple joy of their interactions create a stark contrast with the dark events that are about to unfold. The storm outside mirrors the turmoil that will soon seep into their lives, signaling that their comfortable existence is about to be shattered. Sergeant Major Morris arrived at the White household that evening, a man of many tales, worn and weathered by his years in distant lands. As he stepped in from the rain, shaking off the wet from his coat, the family welcomed him eagerly, eager to hear stories from his travels. But Morris had not come with stories of adventure. No, this time he brought something far more chilling. From the depths of his coat, he revealed a small, withered object. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a mummified piece of flesh, a monkey's paw, shriveled and twisted, as if touched by something far beyond the natural world. This, Morris said in a low, grave voice, is no ordinary relic. It is a talisman, cursed, they say. It was given to a holy man long ago with the power to grant 3 wishes. But those wishes, they come at a terrible cost. Morris's arrival introduces the central object of horror, the monkey's paw. The moment he reveals it, the atmosphere of the story shifts from the warmth of family life to something darker and more mysterious. The paw itself is an unsettling symbol, a seemingly harmless object that carries a deep, malevolent power. The audience feels the weight of the warning, knowing that tampering with such a thing will surely lead to ruin. Despite the ominous warnings, the curiosity of the White family was too strong to resist. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, they gathered around the cursed talisman. Mr. White, still skeptical but intrigued, held the paw in his hand. Its dry, leathery surface felt cold and unnatural. His son, Herbert, ever the playful one, urged him on with a laugh. And so, with a mixture of doubt and a touch of greed, Mr. White made a fateful wish. He whispered for £200, just enough to pay off the mortgage and bring some comfort to their modest lives. The words left his lips, and for a moment, nothing happened. But then, as if in response to the wish, the room grew cold. A sudden gust of wind shook the windows, and the fire flickered dangerously, casting strange, twisted shadows on the walls. The paw moved in his hand as though it were alive, but nothing else seemed to change. The first wish is made in a moment of lightheartedness, but it carries a heavy weight. The seemingly innocent desire for money is tainted by the paw's curse, and the ominous signs, wind, flickering fire, and the paw's movement foretell the darkness that is about to descend on the White family. This scene highlights humanity's temptation to tamper with fate, even when warned of the consequences. The next morning, the eerie tension of the previous night had all but faded away. The Whites carried on with their lives as usual. Over breakfast, Mr. White shared a chuckle with his wife, laughing about how foolish it had all seemed, wishing on an old monkey's paw as if such magic could be real. Herbert, too, was in good spirits, playfully teasing his father about the previous night as he left for work. The family was at ease once more, their lives untouched by the darkness that lingered on the horizon. But as the day went on, a chill crept into the White household. The quiet afternoon was shattered by the sound of a knock at the door. A man, trembling with nerves, stood before them. His face told the story before his words ever did. "There's been an accident," he stammered, eyes downcast. "Your son, Herbert, he was caught in the machinery. He didn't survive. The company wishes to offer their deepest condolences and a sum of £200 in compensation for your loss." The room fell into a suffocating silence. The very thing they had wished for had come, but at a price far greater than they could ever have imagined. Their son, their pride and joy, was gone, and the cursed paw had twisted their simple desire for wealth into a nightmare. This scene marks the devastating realization that the monkey's paw is not a gift, but a curse. The Whites' innocent wish for financial comfort has been granted, but it has cost them their son. This moment is a powerful lesson on the dangers of tampering with fate, as it becomes clear that the paw's magic exacts a cruel toll, offering nothing without extracting something precious in return. Grief weighed heavy in the White household. The lively home that had once been filled with laughter and warmth was now a cold, hollow shell. Days passed, but Mr. and Mrs. White could not escape the crushing sorrow of their son's death. The emptiness of Herbert's absence hung over every moment, every breath. But grief has a way of twisting the mind, of driving people to desperate lengths. As Mrs. White stared at her son's empty chair, a thought mad, impossible began to form. She turned to her husband, her voice shaking with desperation. "The paw," she whispered, her eyes wide and frantic. "Wish him back. Wish Herbert to come back to us." Mr. White recoiled in horror. The very idea sent a shiver down his spine. He had seen the paw's dark magic firsthand, and he feared what might come of such a wish. Yet his wife's pleas, driven by grief and love, were too much for him to resist. With trembling hands, he grasped the monkey's paw once again. He could feel its sinister energy pulsing through his fingers, as though it knew the horror that was about to unfold. Slowly, with a heart full of dread, he whispered his second wish. "Bring Herbert back. Bring him back to us." The second wish delves deeper into the psychological horror of the story. Here, we see how grief and desperation can push even the most rational minds to madness. Mrs. White's desire to bring her son back overrides any caution, while Mr. White's reluctance shows the growing awareness of the paw's malevolent influence. The tension escalates as the audience is left to fear what dark force will answer their call. Minutes passed in silence, and the air in the room grew thick with anticipation. Outside, the wind howled like a warning, but inside, a different fear gripped the Whites. Mr. White sat in the dim glow of the dying fire, his eyes fixed on the cursed paw, his heart pounding in his chest. Then, suddenly, a knock. A low, heavy sound echoed through the house. Mr. White's breath caught in his throat. The paw had granted the wish. Herbert had returned. Mrs. White's heart leaped at the sound. She rushed to the door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the locks, eager to see her son again. She had wished for this moment with every fiber of her being. Herbert was back, and she would embrace him once more. But Mr. White knew better. His heart was filled with dread. He had asked for their son to return, but he feared what form Herbert would take. Death was not easily undone, and whatever stood behind that door was not their son. This scene builds to a terrifying climax, playing on the fear of the unknown. The knock at the door is a symbol of the consequences of meddling with forces beyond human control. While Mrs. White clings to hope, Mr. White's dread reflects the audience's fear. The slow build of suspense, the knocking, and the frozen terror all heighten the psychological tension, leaving the viewer to imagine the horror waiting just beyond the door. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, each bang echoing through the house like a death knell. Mrs. White's hands shook violently as she fumbled with the locks, her heart pounding with desperate hope. Her mind raced. Herbert was there, just on the other side of that door, alive once more. She could feel it. But Mr. White knew better. He knew that whatever waited outside was not the son they had lost. The paw had twisted their wishes before, and it would do so again. His heart pounded in his chest as he stared at the cursed talisman in his hand, knowing what he had to do. With a deep breath, Mr. White made his final, desperate decision. He leaped from his chair, and before his wife could wrench open the door, he raised the paw high and whispered his final wish. His voice was hoarse, trembling, as though the words themselves weighed heavy with dread. I wish my son was dead again." The final wish represents the ultimate, tragic realization of the story's theme, the impossibility of escaping the consequences of tampering with fate. Mr. White's final wish is made out of love, but also fear, as he understands the monstrous cost of bringing his son back in any form other than his original. This moment emphasizes the psychological horror at the core of the story, how far one can go to undo their mistakes, and the unbearable weight of accepting a tragic fate. As the final wish left Mr. White's lips, the knocking stopped. The house fell into an unbearable silence, thick with the weight of what had just transpired. Mrs. White, her heart racing, finally managed to unlock the door. She threw it open, expecting to see her son standing there return to her, just as she had wished. But there was nothing. The doorstep was empty. The night outside was still. The wind had died down to a gentle whisper. The shadows danced in the moonlight, but no figure emerged from them. Mrs. White stood frozen in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Disbelief turned to heartbreak, and slowly, the truth sank in. Herbert was gone, truly gone this time. Her desperate hope had come to nothing. Mr. White, exhausted by the horror of what they had unleashed, sank into his chair. The monkey's paw, now lifeless and spent, slipped from his hand and fell to the floor with a hollow thud. He had made his final wish one of mercy, to undo the madness they had brought upon themselves. But the silence that followed felt heavier than anything he had ever known. This scene marks the end of the Whites' tragic journey. The quiet that follows the final wish is deafening, filled with the weight of their loss and the consequences of their actions. The empty doorstep serves as a haunting symbol of their futile attempt to control fate. The paw, now powerless, represents the finality of their situation. There are no more wishes to be made, no more chances to undo the past. The silence that remains is the true horror, as the Whites are left to live with the devastating consequences of their desires. This final scene leaves the audience with a profound sense of loss and reflection. The White story ends in silence, with no more chances to undo their mistakes. The aftermath of their wishes is a haunting reminder of the price of tampering with fate. The empty, darkened home symbolizes the void left by their actions, and the final reflection on the dangers of desire leaves viewers to ponder the moral of the tale. The house that once rang with laughter and light now sat in darkness, its halls filled with an unbearable silence. The paw, the instrument of their downfall, lay discarded on the floor, its malevolent power spent. It had granted their wishes, but not in the way they had ever imagined. The Whites had learned a terrible lesson, one that came too late to save them. The monkey's paw, with all its promises of power, was not a tool for changing fate, but a curse that twisted the desires of those who dared to use it. Their family, once whole, was now shattered, and nothing could undo the damage. They had wanted what so many people long for: wealth, control over their lives, the power to change things that seemed unjust or unfair. But what they hadn't realized was that some forces are beyond human control. Some things must be left to the natural course of fate, for meddling with such powers only brings ruin. The final scene brings the story's moral into sharp focus. The Whites' journey, which began with simple wishes, has ended in tragedy, and the empty home serves as a symbol of the consequences of trying to alter fate. The monkey's paw is now a powerless relic, a haunting reminder of the dangers of unchecked desire. The Whites are left to live with the irreversible damage they've caused a life defined by loss and sorrow. The story warns against the temptation to manipulate fate and the hubris of believing one can control the outcomes of life. And so, the story of the monkey's paw comes to a close, leaving behind more questions than answers. What would we do if given the power to change our lives with a simple wish? Could we resist the temptation, or would we fall victim to our own desires, as the Whites did? The tale of the monkey's paw is a timeless reminder that some things, no matter how much we may want them, are beyond our control. It's a story of fate, of consequence, and of the dangers that lie in wishing for more than what life has given us. The Whites' tragedy teaches us that not all wishes should be made. In the end, the price of tampering with fate is always more than we can afford to pay. And the monkey's paw, though now hidden away, still serves as a warning to those who might seek to use it again. This scene concludes the story with a moral that transcends the narrative itself, challenging viewers to think about the nature of desire and the consequences of their own wishes. The fading image of the house and the paw being tucked away suggest that while the story has ended, the lesson it carries remains ever present. The visual of the dark sky and the distant house emphasizes the isolation and finality of the Whites' tragedy, driving home the timeless warning about the dangers of wanting too much. Stories like the monkey's paw remind us of the fragility of life and the delicate balance between desire and consequence. It's a tale that has been passed down through generations, each time carrying with it the same warning: be careful what you wish for. Because sometimes, the greatest danger lies not in what you don't have, but in getting exactly what you want at a price you can't bear to pay. And so, as we leave this tale behind, we are left with a question: if given the chance, what would you wish for? And more importantly, could you live with the consequences? For as the whites learned, some wishes come true, but only at a terrible cost. The closing scene offers a final reflection, tying the story to a larger, universal theme about desire, power, and the human condition. It invites the audience to consider the broader implications of the story in their own lives, leaving them with a haunting question that lingers after the video ends. The quiet, dark visual imagery reinforces the message, creating a sense of closure while also leaving room for deeper thought.